Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're joining us from today. Happy that we're able to bring this event to you. Before we get started, I am Matthew Hart, the CEO for Longwinds Publishing, producers of today's discussion. I did want to emphasize that although we're seeing more and more opportunities to get together, the virtual events and the virtual world is here to stay, and that does change how we network and learn about each other and work together. To that, please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. You'll also be able to find our speakers on social media, LinkedIn and Twitter, so please feel free to connect with them as well. I would like to thank Microsoft Canada for their help and support in creating this event. Without their support, we wouldn't be able to produce today's discussion and offer the value and the information that we have here today. And that is a Longwinds mandate, and then we work hard to ensure that everything we bring brings real value to you. So again, thank you for joining us today, and guiding us through the next 90 minutes is someone that many of you will know, and if you don't know, you should know, the Chief Technology Officer for Canada Health Infoway, Mario Voltolina. And Mario, they're all yours.
Well, thank you, Matt, and welcome everybody to what promises to be a really interesting hour and a half. While I have the microphone and before proceeding, I want to put a plug in for a toolkit that Infoway has produced on AI. It is currently focused on governance and risk management, so not overly technical, and you are able to download it from the Infoway website at www.infoway-inforoute.ca. Having gotten that plug out of the way, I'm now very happy to present our keynote speaker, Helia Mohammadi, who is the Chief Data Scientist and Healthcare Lead for Quebec and Western Canada at Microsoft, and will be talking to us about driving healthcare innovation with AI Intrapreneurship. Helia, the floor is yours.
Wonderful, thank you, Mario. Just to double check if everyone can see my screen now.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So hello everyone, my name is Helia Mohammadi and I'm the Chief Data Scientist and Healthcare Industry Lead for Microsoft Canada. I use pronouns she and her, and today I'm wearing my eyeglasses, a white top, and a yellow jacket. Before I begin, I wish to acknowledge that the land on which I'm meeting you on today is the territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Chippewa, and Wendat peoples, and it's now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, Métis peoples, and I also like to acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. I will be covering several areas during this keynote, including some guidelines around how to become an AI intrapreneur in your healthcare organization. I will there share some existing AI applications in the Canadian healthcare system and some of the best practices in maintaining an AI project in healthcare. Then I will share Microsoft principles of ethical AI, and finally I will address the AI skills gap and how to address it. I really believe that the first step in designing an AI strategy is to either identify the innovative stakeholders, who might like to call champions or AI intrapreneurs, or to become an AI intrapreneur yourself to bring AI and technology closer to your organization. So who is an AI intrapreneur? It's the person within an organization who actively searches for gaps or challenges to improve a process or a system in their own organization. And in general, they are reimagining healthcare with the goal of deploying AI-infused or innovative solutions to solve for those challenges to improve outcomes. AI intrapreneurs, unlike entrepreneurs, can make a big impact with a much lower risk, and oftentimes they are much successful if they receive executive sponsorship from their peers or the high-level decision makers. when you have the patients and the care teams in the center of your focus, there are recurring steps to surround them with the right tools and the technologies. It's an active practice of building and developing new solutions and updating existing healthcare apps, enriching the healthcare line of business applications or platforms, include platforms such as Teams, Azure, or Dynamics, to really strengthen the overall healthcare ecosystem, and then extending and embedding new features and capabilities or configurations within your solution, and then connecting and leveraging APIs or connectors or extensions such as Azure Fire API or IoT connectors to connect the newly developed technology into your existing solutions. And finally, enabling and deriving functional implementations such as the last mile customization to each stakeholder's needs, and derive interoperability and data governance and the adoption and the use. And then collect feedback and repeat the process of build, enrich, extend, connect, and enable across data, workflow, and cloud scale analytics to further improve outcomes such as improved patient outcomes, care team empowerment, especially during this pandemic, improve clinical and operational outcomes while protecting the health information in the secure and private manner. I'd like to talk about 3 elements basically in AI entrepreneurship that can help with the constructive cycle of reimagining healthcare to be able to achieve these outcomes. And these 3 elements include overcoming challenges when you're leading a change, improving the AI adoption readiness, and lastly, leveraging the right tools and trainings. These 3 elements are identified to be the key contributors to the success of the AI entrepreneurs in Canada and also around the globe, based on many conversations that we have with the healthcare decision makers on a day-to-day basis. Now let's drill into each of these elements. When you're leading a change, in many cases, the innovation and the AI-infused solution you're aiming to bring to your organization falls outside the scope of your day-to-day roles and responsibilities. As a result, reimagining the healthcare demands more efforts and may take longer compared to when you are tasked to deploy such solution. What worked best is to seek executive sponsorship and bring together a V team with other talented and like-minded individuals in your organization. Training and skilling becomes a critical and crucial and an inevitable part of the process, both for the developers of the new AI solution and also for the end users and the stakeholders to adopt to the new change and to use that technology. This is, it's shown that the leveraging the citizen data scientists and upskilling your existing teams is more efficient and cost beneficial. And you can upskill your teams on how to leverage new technologies to create innovative solutions, and also educate them on how to use the new tools through change management practices, for example. The most efficient path, I believe, is through partnerships with the technology providers and platform builders themselves, such as Microsoft, to bring their training resources to your organization. Another challenge when leading a change can be around productization of proof of concepts or proof of values. The challenge lies within having technical bandwidths, limited technical resources to move from development and test phases to production, and on the other hand, to receive approvals and in some cases clinical trials to successfully include the new technology to your workflow. The second element that was shown to contribute to the success of an AI entrepreneur is to improve readiness of the organization's AI adoption. This can and very well extends to provincial and national level healthcare AI and data sharing adoption. Despite proven high security and privacy of cloud platforms, and despite knowing that data sharing will unlock tremendous potential to improve outcomes, there's still resistance to build an infrastructure that allows for data sharing and data interoperability to facilitate secure access to data and analytics. As an AI intrapreneur, you need to understand why a certain organization or health authority at provincial or national level is only ready to, for innovative pilots and not ready for bringing innovation closer to the healthcare system easily. What can be done today so that, the innovative pilots we are running today can become examples and success stories and best practices of tomorrow. There are several examples that can solve for questions like, when can an ideal that is emerging from an emergency department, for example, become useful across all the ERs in Canada? How can we understand where the patients are across the emergency department and on their care journey at a fingertip? How can we triage patients easier and more efficiently? How can researchers and scientists access data and collaborate and develop algorithms in a scalable, robust, and secure way? I will share examples of how Ontario and other provinces are currently paving the way in the space. And the question is, how can we scale these innovations, scale it up even further to expand to other healthcare organizations and provinces? And how do we go beyond a province and across the country? And how do we prepare Canada for more innovative technology? With projects like virtual care, we can extend and expand and analyze the impact of virtual care compared to more traditional care. We can give more access to patients to increase equity of access to healthcare and ultimately improve care. An AI intrapreneur often finds themselves with legacy applications or existing infrastructure that may be archaic and not built to support an interoperable interaction. And improving the infrastructure will pave the way for future innovation so that they are more easily integrated. We've seen that breaking data silos and creating a data sharing platform or a data warehouse, if you will, can significantly improve efficiency and can significantly reduce costs. And it's really because maintaining a single source of truth is more efficient than keeping and updating multiple copies of the same data. And this will lead to more accurate, data-driven results by the scientists and data analysts in your organization through accessing more data. The organization's readiness can also be improved through developing an AI and innovation strategy. At Microsoft, we have supported countless organizations to build their AI strategy, especially when it comes to their responsible AI principles and guidelines. And finally, the last element is to be able to access the right tools and the technologies to drive accelerated innovation and outcomes. Tools such as pre-built AI or cloud components that, such as different APIs for Microsoft Cognitive Services that can be leveraged to infuse AI into your solutions without having a PhD in machine learning or AI. These components include, transcribing speech to text or text to speech to create human-like interactions. It includes translation capabilities, image processing, data analytics using drag and drop platforms, for example, to reduce the number of coding, and identifying text and digitizing scanned documents and health reports, which is a big challenge, and including chatbots or conversational AI or health text analytics, and many more. In many cases, these AI components are ready to be used as building blocks, if you will, with minimal efforts and with only a few mouse clicks. And because these components are pre-built and built and managed by highly experienced teams with the main goal to democratize AI, it makes it so much easier to be able to leverage these components. The low-code and no-code platforms on cloud can also help in developing AI solutions with minimum to no coding experience. And these tools can aid the domain experts, such as clinicians or nurses or decision makers, who don't have access to a team of developers or do not have a computer science degree to create and develop AI-powered solutions. With these tools, you can explore feasibility of AI and also cloud in solving real-world challenges in only a few hours or days. A fantastic example I'd like to share with you is a dashboard for color codes, such as code orange, yellow, and black, that was developed in Ontario by the nursing department. These dashboards were built by domain experts who don't have any coding experience or cloud background, and who wanted to make a change in their organization and improve quality of care, both for the patients and the care teams. And with this solution, the different units are notified of a missing patient and map that to the floor of different departments and can identify the areas where those areas were searched, or the areas that needed to be combed for a missing patient during a code, especially in a pediatric hospital. Another asset would be to build partnerships with AI and data and cloud partners to become your extended technical team and consultation resources. As we all know, AI is already infused into several areas of our lives for good, and it's not a question of whether to use AI in healthcare. It's really a matter of when and how. Now let's explore some of the AI innovations in healthcare. One of the areas that AI can help with is to drive intelligence out of the EMR or EHR data. For instance, with Epic, Allscripts, Meditech, or other EMRs, we can wrap innovation and innovative technologies around these EMRs to drive better outcome. There are numerous areas that cloud and AI can be beneficial in the healthcare space. One of the areas is the healthcare digital front door, or outpatient digital technologies. We have the technology to seamlessly integrate into the EMRs to drive data-informed decisions or observe patterns and analyze the data in a bi-directional fashion. And this is of importance as the care teams are comfortable interacting with their existing EMR solution or their the technology that they're using, and wrapping around their tool of preference. We can give them more capabilities without the need for them to log out of their EMRs to look at their e-referrals, for instance, or give patients the ability to book or reschedule the appointments and look at predicted wait times, for example, so that they choose the right hospital based on their distance and the wait times. Another AI-powered solution that helps with operational optimization is predicting the length of stay to optimize for the duration of a patient's stay while reducing the rate of patient returns. These are some examples that are currently deployed on cloud by the champions and entrepreneurs of several hospitals across the country. We know that the technology is here. We have access to the solutions that can help alleviate some of the existing healthcare challenges. And we can analyze patient records to mine the data and derive more data-focused observations. We can build a data sharing platform that enables future analytics and infusion of other technologies into the existing pipelines. I really believe the key is in creating and building a scalable, secure, elastic, yet flexible and agile infrastructure so that we can, seamlessly integrate the entrepreneurial solutions into the care routine. We need to consolidate the data, then break the data silos in a secure and private way, and also build solutions to allow patients to be the custodians and the owners of their own data. And this is really important. This way we can include the patients and also their caregivers in the process to decide whether or not they want to participate in research studies, and more importantly, to give them a portal to have a holistic view of their care journey, their test results, their diagnostics in one place. And on the other hand, we need to facilitate advanced analytics and AI to develop meaningful outcomes based on the consented and consolidated data in this data warehouse, if you will. I would like to play a video for you that shows some of the applications of AI in healthcare.
It's the symbiotic relationship between the human and machine that brings the magic of AI to medicine in a meaningful way.
Now we have the tools to make a huge difference to human life.
Cancer research is increasingly powered by data. Those data remain siloed across institutions.
We're creating a data ecosystem that allows people to share data and making sure that we're doing that in a way that still maintains the privacy of the patients.
With the power of AI, we can go after the unknown. And I can guarantee that we'll find something that nobody expected.
Silent death syndrome scares every mother and father, and it is a problem we have to change. The collaboration with Microsoft, AI for Health, will help to start this next step of our discovery. Our data show very convincingly clear correlation between smoking and SIDS, and just changing behavior can save children's lives. You cannot measure the benefit of that.
It's a sad day when the patient comes in and I can't impact them.
Through AI for Health, we will be building an AI solution that can autonomously diagnose diabetic retinopathy.
With the portable camera, I can take healthcare to the patients who would not be able to come to us.
I want you to look right here.
Going forward, we can address the 500 million patients that are out there and disrupt this disease. AI for Health and IRIS together can have that impact.
Today, there are 200,000 leprosy patients diagnosed every year. If you catch it in the stage of a skin lesion, you can cure the person. We are teaching an AI algorithm to recognize leprosy in an image of a skin lesion.
With AI, we can help patients help themselves to get to the right experts at the right time. If you can help a child to not lose their fingers, that means everything.
Innovation comes from bringing different perspectives together. And what an amazing partnership this is for all of us.
When you see that you can make a big impact on somebody's life, that's the greatest thing ever.
We can help eliminate the oldest disease known to man and make history. That's how we want to contribute to the world.
I mentioned responsible AI earlier. At Microsoft, we have developed 6 principles that guide the development and deployment of any AI solution to be ethical. I always emphasize that the use of AI needs to be closely and strongly regulated to make sure that the solution leads to what we call a responsible AI solution. And this can be done through the creation of an ethical framework. When we are including any AI-powered solution, we have the responsibility to make sure that the solution is ethical. And moreover, we need to study the social impact and potential human harm to mitigate or even halt the use of AI. Although our goal is to democratize AI, as I mentioned earlier, so that domain experts and AI entrepreneurs can access it easily, we do not allow misuse of our technology. For that reason, we have put together the Office of Responsible AI to closely probe any AI-powered solutions and share our feedback with our customers and partners. We need to make sure that the machine learning models are transparent and the humans are held accountable. And more importantly, AI solutions must be designed to be inclusive, private, and secure. We have a team specifically dedicated to ethical AI in Canada to support our customers and partners and, with designing a fair, transparent, accountable, private, and ethical AI. Our team in Canada is led by our National Technology Officer with many individuals from different functions, including myself. We talked about supporting researchers and data scientists. As an entrepreneur, one of the areas to improve is to support the researchers in your organization. Or if you are a researcher, here is a framework on how to communicate your needs to the IT to get better support from your, basically for you and your peers in that organization from the IT. The Research Center of Excellence on Cloud framework not only can address the challenges of accessing data and breaking data silos and collaborating with peers seamlessly in secure and private manner, and also accessing compute resources to run experiments faster, but also it can extend the support to empower the researchers to achieve more with the tools and technologies and programs and best practices and trainings and architecture samples and many, many more. This framework is really a turnkey and comprehensive research offering that includes 6 pillars, each of which contains several modules, if you will. And these modules are composable, which means that they can be leveraged on, basically one at a time or in groups. You don't have to deploy them sequentially. Ultimately, what we're hoping to bring to you through this framework is a close partnership. We know research requirements inside and out, and we want to be your partner to help you design your own research environment so that you're able to leverage what worked with other institutes and learn from what didn't to get to 80% of the deployment quickly. And then, customize the remaining 20% so you can stand up a secure and reliable environment in a timely fashion. This is a bird's eye view breakdown of this framework. I want to highlight some of the key modules here, especially under the security and governance. We really want to streamline compliance with a comprehensive portfolio spanning 60 certifications to make it easier to basically provide granular access control and role-based governance in addition to identity management and multi-layer security, so that you can streamline cross-team and cross-organizational collaboration. On the data and AI analytics pillar, we have tremendous number of tools and technologies for different end users, whether for the IT who are supporting research workloads or for the domain experts who are not proficient in programming languages, giving them tools to create decision support systems, for example, medical image classification in a few hours, or for the data scientists and the machine learning engineers who prefer interacting with CLI and coding. We hear many times from our customers that their hard drives are failing them, or they find maintaining multiple data silos challenging. With this framework, you're able to break the data silos and put in place data sharing platforms with granular access control and secure manner. And you're also able to build metadata management so that the researchers or the users of your data can see what the data looks like without actually accessing the data before permissions and approvals. We also have solutions around data de-identification, solutions where you can containerize your algorithms, for example, and run them against the data without being able to even look at the data. On the compute side, to address the research workload spikes, traditional IT typically procures more hardware upfront, which increases the CapEx expenditure, and ultimately, the researchers are limited to certain types of compute, which will get old in a few years, and also you will have the hardware sits in the facility unused during those idle times. So you can access high performance compute and virtually unlimited compute resources with many different specifications and configurations. We also provide confidential computing through algorithms such as homomorphic encryption. The collaboration and development pillar also includes solutions such as trusted research environment, which creates a secluded, highly secure environment as a self-serve platform so that IT can predefine these workspaces and the researchers don't have to rely on IT for every single project that they want to run. So it's very light on the IT workload and it's highly secure. And finally, with the last pillar, we offer extensive trainings, whether one-on-one or hackathons or events. And this is particularly very important when we are facing AI skills gaps. We offer the largest number of documented and open source content in the world, and through our partner ecosystem, you can also have access to teams of experts and extend your technical resources based on the work you're performing. Now let's shift gears. and talk about the use of mixed reality in healthcare. As an AI intrapreneur, you need to have visibility over the art of the possible to bring the right tools in the mix at the right time. And as I mentioned earlier, this is possible when you have a solid interoperable infrastructure and data solution so that we can bring more advanced technologies to the care platform. And when we're looking at augmented reality and virtual reality, we're talking about the extended medical reality, and this technology is used not only in education and simulation and trainings, but also in digital therapies to do pain management, for example, or managing the mental wellness or palliative care. And one of my favorite use cases of this technology is the pediatric care, and where virtual reality or augmented reality glasses like HoloLens are used to distract the kids when they are going through painful or uncomfortable examinations or procedures. It can also be used for patients who are locked up to their beds due to lack of movement, so that with this technology, they can feel more connected and have a more normal life. I would like to play a very short video to demonstrate some of the capabilities that mixed reality can bring closer to the healthcare system.
Medicine is in the midst of digital change. Mixed reality and artificial intelligence are already improving patient care today. Virtual Surgery Intelligence, or VSI, is doing just that. With this software solution, MRI, CT, and other medical scans are displayed in 3D in Microsoft HoloLens 2 mixed reality glasses. This gives the patient a deeper understanding of the results, surgical procedures, and treatment methods. Before surgery, the doctor uploads the CT and MRI data onto HoloLens 2. The VSI recognizes the patient through anatomical landmarks and positions the stored image on the surgical site with millimeter precision. During the after-surgery round, the patient's data is quickly retrieved and displayed using VSI and HoloLens 2. At a glance and without a computer, the doctor can concentrate fully on the patient, answer questions, and discuss follow-up medical care. Being able to easily dictate a report, take photos, and retrieve archived images saves valuable time, facilitates everyday life in the hospital, and provides quality assurance. That will also make other processes in the hospital more efficient. VSI and Microsoft HoloLens 2 define a new medical standard.
So first of all, Helia, thanks very much, and thank you for showing us the capabilities that Microsoft has built in the space. Always a visionary organization. Right now, we're going to move on to a speed round of presentations with our first presenter being Sheila Agarwal. Sheila is the Chief Medical Information Officer for Diagnostic Imaging and AI with Nuance Communications. And Sheila is going to talk to us about the overall market landscape for imaging AI. Sheila, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Mario. Thanks for the introduction. My name is Sheila Agarwal, and as he mentioned, I'm Chief Medical Information Officer at Nuance for Diagnostics and AI, and I'm also an abdominal radiologist. So today I'm going to be talking about the market landscape and giving a general overview of AI and its uses currently in medical imaging. So why medical imaging? Well, first, because I am a radiologist, so of course it's an area that is near and dear to me. But secondly, because nearly every patient story starts with an image. And that's why it's more important than ever to find more efficient, effective ways to share data and insights, to bridge medical information silos, and to increase positive patient outcomes and to decrease costs. So as you can see here, almost 80% of imaging of patients have imaging somewhere associated with their journey in healthcare. And additionally, there's a huge cost to the healthcare system associated with this, $65 billion. So 80% of all hospital and health system visits include at least one imaging study. But there's some issues here. 15% of imaging studies are duplicated. 50% of recommended imaging is not followed up or completed, and $375 billion is attributed to waste based on misdiagnosis. So, as you can see, these are all opportunities where AI can come in and really provide high value impact in radiology and add value to the radiologist and to the healthcare system as a whole. So I want to talk quickly about the various types of AI that you can see, that one could relate to each of these issues, but even more broadly. So quickly, just to go through the various types of AI in medical imaging. I think the one that most people think of automatically is interpretive AI. So this is, of course, computer-aided imaging, computer-aided triage, computer-aided detection, or computer-aided detection of disease, or diagnosis of disease. So this is where the AI is looking at the pixels or looking at the image itself and helping the radiologist in that interpretive process. AI can also help in that interpretive process in the processing of the image itself. So whether to make the image more clear for the radiologist to look for a particular diagnosis. It can also help in the quantification of different findings on the image, again, to help in that interpretive process. When it comes to non-interpretive AI, we can think about AI that helps in workflow efficiencies. So this could be image-aware location of prior imaging that might have been done at other institutions. So obviously this would help in the 15% of imaging studies that are all duplicated. It can also help in follow-up management. So making sure that the appropriate stakeholders within that healthcare pathway are aware of recommended imaging follow-ups and making sure that those actually occur. Other types of non-interpretive AI can be text-based AI, so natural language processing. And this can help the radiologist in report generation and report structuring. And for that, I just want to give one quick example of that, which is the Nuance Ambient mode, which is inside our dictation software called PowerScribe 1. And here, what you can see is that ambient mode allows the radiologist to keep their eyes on the image, but be sure that all the information that they're seeing on that image is automatically inserted into the right field of the report so that the downstream referring physician is able to see a standardized structured report with actionable data in the appropriate area. But the radiologist can do what they do best, which is to look at the image and report not based on this structured field having to switch from one screen to another, but stay on the image, and all of the information is automatically populated where it should be. So now to switch gears and talk about a little bit more on the interpretive AI. Here I have what I call the periodic table of imaging AI. What you can see on the left here are the various different imaging modalities, and on the top here are the various different imaging modalities, and on the left here are the various different subspecialties of practice and imaging. And what each one of the squares within this matrix then represents is a particular use case in which AI could be applied. For example, we have an MR of the knee, which may find or show a PCL tear. So this is one very specific use case where narrow AI could help the radiologist. And of course, then by looking at each one of these squares as a whole, we have the entire landscape of possible use cases where AI can help in the radiologist interpretation. And this comprises approximately 23,000 different diagnoses that radiologists currently look at using imaging. So what does the market landscape look like today? So in the US, we can look at this over time and say, okay, how many AI applications exist and where do they currently exist? And what you can see is the adoption, or not the adoption, sorry, the commercialization of AI was actually quite slow at the beginning. And then by 2018, you can see that there was quite a jump. And again, in that similar matrix format, you can see the subspecialties on the left and the various different modalities on the top. And here you can see a heat map of the different areas where AI tools were being developed and commercialized in radiology. So by 2018, 2018, there was a marked shift in the acceleration in terms of the speed of commercialization. And as you can see, that this continued through 2022, whereas the predominant number of algorithms do exist in neuroradiology, and then thoracic imaging or chest imaging, followed by breast imaging. So quickly, I wanted to also show what this heat map looks like for Health Canada right now. And this is by no means complete. I'm not an expert when it comes to the Canadian landscape, but from what I could find, this is what the Health Canada landscape currently looks like, with 9 cleared applications in these various areas. And specifically, we can see here are the various different products that have been cleared for use in Canada. And each one of these, even though I only have 4 here, this does actually represent the 9 that were shown on the last slide. It's just some of these, for example, AI Rad Companion is 5 different tools in cardiovascular, musculoskeletal, pulmonary, brain, and prostate MR. Lastly, I just want to spend 1 minute talking about a different way that we can categorize and see imaging AI. So first, I showed you things based on the subspecialty and based on modality. Here, what I want to show is how we might be able to group these different AIs based on the value proposition that they bring to healthcare and to the radiologist. So very quickly to walk through these. Can't see. This is where the AI is helping in tasks where the radiologist physically cannot see the finding, whereas the computer could. So this could be things such as using AI to find things on a non-contrast scan, whereas the radiologist needs contrast to see that result, for example. Or it could be very complicated volumetric measurements, such as measuring an entire area of fat that a computer can do, whereas a human can't. The next area is can't miss. These are tasks that could be easily missed. They could be potentially on the edge of the film, incidental findings that are tangential to the reason that the scan was performed. So for example, a lung nodule that's incidentally seen on the very top of an abdominal study that was done for appendicitis. The next category is can't stand. These are those tedious tasks that are difficult and time consuming and really contribute to physician burnout. So multiple measurements, a lot of the tasks involved with paperwork and reporting. And lastly is the category of can't lose. So this is where there's the potential for radiology to be disintermediated because there are tasks that downstream physicians want that the imaging might be able to do. So again, these are the 4 different value propositions that you can see within radiology AI today. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Sheila. That was fascinating. I'll definitely be thinking more of this next time I have my picture taken. We're now going to move on, and I'm going to invite Robert Greer to our virtual stage. Robert is with the Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto, and he's going to talk to us about recruiting for AI teams.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Mario, for the introduction. My name is hold on. There we go. My name is Bobby Greer. As Mario said, I am the technical lead of the Artificial Intelligence and Medicine for Kids program here at the Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto. And what our program really seeks to do, or what it was born out of, is the realization that at least here and in many academic medical centers, there's a ton of data science and machine learning research already done. And what we need to do is figure out a way to take this from research and actually clinically deploy stuff, because if it's not making it through to clinical deployment, kind of what's the point? So our program was established to basically solve a lot of the common challenges and build an infrastructure to really scale that. And as the technical lead, I'm both building the technical system, which we're working with Microsoft and Azure to build, but I'm also building the people team that's going to enable it, and that's what I want to talk about today. some of you are probably thinking the same thing. I want to deploy ML models into production. What are the kind of peoples, what are the kind of skills that I'm going to need to do it? So the first thing we really need to think about is, what are we trying to do? Are we interested in just deploying existing ML solutions? As we heard before from Helia and from Sheila, there's lots of these solutions coming around. Maybe our focus is less on deploying homegrown solutions and more on off-the-shelf solutions. Or let's say you're from an academic medical center and you want to create a new ML solution and you want to deploy that. Or more likely, if you're the latter, you really want to do both. So what are the kind of people that we need to do that? So say you're just wanting to deploy a model. Typically what you would need, at least at the very beginning from a technical perspective, is a systems engineer. And not to scare people, this is really kind of the same as what typically exists in hospital settings already. Deploying ML models, aside from the software being different, small variations in the hardware, it's really kind of a standard thing. It's not anything really new or anything. But what I would want to introduce you to is the recruitment of a translational resource. And I will admit a little bit of bias here. This is kind of where I got my start at Sick Kids, as being what effectively grew into this translational resource. But I can't stress enough how important it is, if you actually want an ML solution that's deployed to actually be effective in the clinical environment, to have this kind of translational resource. So if you're deploying an off-the-shelf system, it could be something as simple as a clinical resource that has a technical background. That could be that kind of bedside or clinically embedded resource to basically gather feedback and help iterate and make sure you can close that loop back to the technical team. If you're actually building models, then again, it's that feedback loop of taking the feedback that you're getting from people at the bedside, feeding it back to the technical team, so the solutions that you're building can ultimately improve. So say you're actually interested in also creating and deploying a model. So the first thing I would say is take everybody from the previous slide, copy it over here. You'll need those people as well. Don't let that dissuade you though. Other than that, you're going to need a data scientist, obviously. Typically, if you're in this kind of pathway, you already have these people. I know at Sick Kids, we have tens of data scientists around that are actively building models. But if you need to get it from kind of an academic exercise where people are largely taking a data set and generating some output, if you really need to take that and actually operationalize it, especially if you have to do it at scale, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to download all of that work onto a data scientist. So in that case, you'd want to invest in an ML engineer. And what an ML engineer really is somebody who's going to take models developed by data scientists, build the processes around it, and basically make it ready for production deployment. They typically have a strong background in ML and software engineering, but aren't necessarily involved in the model development itself, more on the processes surrounding it. And as your program matures, a data engineer is somebody that you would definitely want to invest in. Sort of like an ML engineer, they work on kind of pipelines and processes, but more around staging and setting up all the data beforehand to get the data into a standard form to put into an ML model. And as we've heard, I mean, the medical world is filled with all kinds of different types of data that exist in different forms in different places. So a data engineer is really somebody who's going to be very key to pulling it all together and making the lives of everybody else much easier. So with all that said, how do you find these kind of people? What's the recruitment thing? And I'll first say is you definitely don't need to hire all these people at once. A lot of people, so myself as an example, I worked as kind of a data engineer, ML engineer for a while. I crossed the boundary. You can start basically as small as big as you want. The other point I would note is you would, whether you are ultimately looking to deploy on the cloud or on premises, you are going to need these types of people. So recruitment, it is, as these days, the persistent challenge. And one of the biggest challenges we face as a healthcare industry, or especially as hospitals, is we're really not the typical place that people go to look for work. especially in these areas. So overcoming that can be very challenging. And it's also a super competitive industry. And with that comes pretty high compensation requirements. So I know specifically in Canada, in our public healthcare system, it can be quite hard to compete with companies like Microsoft that are willing to pay much higher compensation amounts for people. And the other thing we're up against really is the effect that the pandemic has had, which is more and more people working from home and people wanting to work remote, even in different countries. And that is something that, at least in our industry and in our area in public healthcare, is typically not common. The other thing that's going on, obviously, there's lots of churn, so people are moving around. But I'm going to come back to that because that's also, I think, one of the strengths that we have as an industry to actually retain and recruit great talent. So how do we actually go about finding these people and solving some of the previous challenges? So based on my own recruiting experience, speaking with people that I've recruited and looking around at other hospitals, the #1 piece of advice I would give is to stick with the job titles and descriptions that are in line with industry. So those titles that I just gave you are industry titles, industry kind of descriptions. And why that's so important is because so often in healthcare, we come up with job descriptions and titles that we think are very descriptive and derive it and get at what we want people to do. But if you're coming at it from the tech industry, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So if you keep things standard, people can really basically understand immediately what the role is going to be. And to overcome the challenge of having people just know that you can work here, it's really important to advertise. And we've had quite a bit of luck with social media and recruitment sites. But one of the techniques that I was introduced to by somebody that we hired that ultimately led to us hiring people through this means was actually leveraging online communities. So there's a wealth of data science communities within chat apps like Slack, as some of you may be familiar with, and Telegram, where people are always working on problems and answering challenges. Most of these places have job boards that you can post, and I have found an amazing wealth of talent there of people. The other thing is be creative. So we're still, I'll admit, struggling to recruit people in certain aspects. And part of our creativity is we're going to try to leverage some of our marketing power here to build a bit of a marketing campaign to basically just try to introduce people to the idea of working here. The other thing is be patient. There are a lot of people out there, and in fact, some of my greatest hires are people that have come from the tech industry that are interested in coming and working for a group that's has a more tangible benefit. So rather than working in a tech company, building an ML model that's going to drive more advertising revenue into the company, people are now wanting to come and actually work on something that they can find very meaningful. And linking back to churn that I talked about before, tech companies also tend to be a lot less stable than jobs in the healthcare industry. And people saw the volatility of employment through the pandemic and are now choosing to come to places where there is a bit more security. So be patient. You will find great people. I know we have. So thank you very much. Mario.
Thanks, Bobby. I'm sure there'll be all sorts of resumes coming your way shortly. We're going to keep moving, but before we do, I would invite anybody who has questions to please enter them in the question area of the GoToWebinar control panel, and we will be having a question and answer session after the next two presentations. We're now going to invite Mehdi Somji, who is Director of Innovation and Partnerships at Trillium Healthcare Partners, and he's going to talk to us on how we should be evaluating these machine learning and AI technologies. So, Mehdi, please go ahead.
Oh, thank you, and I'm just trying to, are you able to see my screen or not?
We can see your browser that says connected to GoToWebinar.
All right, let me.
Now we can see your PowerPoint. Yep.
Perfect. Is it in presentation mode, I hope?
It was, and then it exited.
All right. I apologize for that. Hopefully that's good.
Yeah, that looks good.
All right. Awesome. And so thanks so much. And so my name is Mehdi. I'm the Director of Innovation and Partnerships at Trillium Health Partners. And today I'll be speaking a little bit about cloud computing as well as AI evaluation. And maybe I'll focus a little bit more on AI evaluation and walking through a little bit of background around Trillium. So we are the largest community hospital within Ontario with about 1.7 million patient visits annually. And that's incredibly important when we talk a little bit about AI, setting a little bit of context and a little bit about some of the data and the patients that we see. We have a lot of diversity within our community. So about 51% of patients or residents who are born outside of Canada within our catchment. Quite a number of immigrants that do identify as visible minorities. Seniors, different levels of socioeconomic status, and again, lots and lots of data when it comes from both from an EMR perspective as well as medical images. A little bit in kind of double tapping on what Robert had mentioned around our team. And so it is definitely a team sport. And we do have, whether it's from a clinical perspective, from an architect perspective, or data scientists and engineers, as well as PMs, that help drive a lot of this work. And so I'll share a couple of examples of our AI deployment and evaluation lab to give you some real world examples of what this could look like within an organization and some of the team and expertise that are really behind this. I'm going to pause maybe for about a minute just on this slide to mention and really highlight some of what Helia had mentioned around that cloud-based environment, which really helps unlock the way that we work with whether it's our scientists, our clinician scientists, researchers, or even external partners, the ability to upload and have our data available within a governed cloud environment, which of course adheres to privacy, security, all of those elements, and follows those principles of ethics as well as de-identification. But the ability to provide governed access to our data when we're working through, whether it's from an AI evaluation perspective or others, it's really helped unlock the abilities that we've had as an organization. And so double clicking on everything that Helia had mentioned around the benefits of the cloud. And when we think about AI evaluation, and so I know that Robert had mentioned two types of models where you may have a model where you're deploying existing ML models or you're developing ML models. And so in this scenario, for instance, you have an AI model that we're developing. We typically use a data set that's available to us, perhaps it's within your own organization, and then you're deploying that model within your organization. And when we're thinking about scale, there are some specific implications we need to think about when it comes from an AI evaluation perspective. So one of them is when we think about our patient distribution. So patient distribution at our hospital might look very different than a hospital that we're deploying into. And so as an example, if we're training our ML model on a group of men who are in their 50s, and in hospital 2, you have primarily women who are in their 30s, let's say, the way that the model may perform may not be the same as the way that it was originally intended within the first hospital. And the same can go on as you continue to think of other cohorts and a lot of from a diversity perspective. The model may not perform as intended against additional populations because it wasn't trained on those populations. So this is one of the needs from an AI evaluation perspective. The other would be data drift. And so as we're thinking about a model that was originally developed, let's say into 2020, the patients that you may see, whether it's from a pandemic perspective or shifts in patient population, new immigrants that may come in, your patient distribution may change year over year. And so again, warranting the need for AI evaluation, you might have created a clinical model that's based off of specific triggers, which is based off of the accuracy of the model. And if we don't think through how that model may evolve over time based off of our patient distribution and the accuracy of that model, it may impact the way that we're actually making decisions off of it. And so to counteract some of this, there are different methods, and quite a bit of these are theoretical, but there's one element of pooled data. So can we combine data sets from different organizations to be able to train our models? And of course, you can imagine the host of privacy and security implications that that has. And so it's a little more theoretical at that point. And federated learning, where it's essentially the data is sitting at the home hospital and the models are being trained locally at each of those hospitals. And again, not a very common approach at this point, more theoretical, but this again is all warranting the need for AI evaluation before the AI model is actually being deployed at your site or scaled to others. And that's some of the work that we do. And going back to the original slide that we had on THP and some of our diverse patient population, we have a pretty rich patient population that is very diverse, and that's what we leverage in terms of performing AI evaluations within our newly launched AI Deployment and Evaluation Lab. And so this lab is led by Dr. Ben Fine. And really, when we think about whether it's data drift, where patient distributions are different from the hospital that's something that's from a ML model is trained at, or if patient distributions change over time, or even if we think about AI algorithms, many of them, which are FDA approved, especially from a medical imaging perspective, haven't actually been trained in the real world. And so do they have the same impact? Does the model fail when it's presented with something that's maybe unexpected in the real world? And from a health equity perspective, when we look at model performance, we may look at it at an aggregate view for an entire population. But does the model perform the same for different age groups, across different genders, across different sort of ethnicities as well? And so the ability again, and that's what we do within the AIDE lab, is looking at these different cohorts and how does the model actually perform? So to give you an example, and again, this is a high-level example, we've de-identified a lot of the information around the organization. Don't want to actually give you some true data there, but just to give you a feel of what this actually looks like is, a sample project over here where we had an AI algorithm that was really on predicting admission of patients with suspected community-acquired pneumonia. And the clinical impact here is by knowing this at that time, it would help with accelerated admission or discharge from the ED. So our training data was looking at some chest x-rays for patients. We had a series of many patients where this model was trained on at a different site, which we will refer to as the internal validation site. And we were able to train this model off of many of these types of patients. The host organization was able to train this model off of many patients that they had. And it was based off of a deep learning model. And so when we look at some of this data, and again, the internal validation or the host organization is in gray, when you look at the sensitivity of the model, so the positive rate or the specificity, which is at that negative rate, you can see that the sensitivity and specificity were lower within the external validation site, which is THP, and compared to that internal validation. So again, different model performance when it's compared against a different patient population. This is a very simplified view. This was probably, and you can see a sample of a few slides that I have on the right side, which was pulled out of a deck of about 20 to 30 different slides. So looking at the model in terms of the performance of the model in terms of the clinical context, model calibration, discrimination, and overall, we roll all of this up into a model fact card to really understand all the different elements within a model. And some of the key takeaways here is when we're thinking, especially within your organization, if you're thinking about AI evaluation or AI deployment, is really understanding what is being able to test models against your patient population. Some organizations are even looking at retraining some of those models to really fit for your organization, and the importance to ensure that you have that ongoing evaluation built into those clinical deployments to ensure that the original use case that you had intended is continuing to hold true.
Great, thank you, Maddie. Much appreciated. And now, as we bring it home towards the end of these short presentations, we're going to hand the baton back to Microsoft. And we have Naveen Balluri, who's Principal Group Manager of Health AI at Microsoft. And he's going to talk to us about operational needs.
Hello. I'm just trying to make sure that the right screen is getting projected.
Yeah, we're seeing your super wide view.
Got it. All right. Hopefully now it's better.
There you go.
Yeah, thank you. Hey, and I'm going to try and keep this as quickly as possible. My name is Naveen. I work in the product group at Microsoft in the Health AI division, and it's great to hear some of the previous speakers and the perspectives they share. It sort of ties into what we are seeing, and especially something that Sheila brought about. Now that we are both now part of the same company, it's really exciting to see the view and the experience that they bring to healthcare. So my talk is mostly going to be about how we are approaching it from a platform and tools perspective at Microsoft. The work that we are doing, we work with big strategic customers, try to understand their use cases, and then try to figure out how best to operationalize that. And so I'll give you what I'm seeing, and I'll start off with some of the trends. And I think, Sheila hit upon this, where AI can help. A lot of the data, 80% is unstructured. This is a place where AI can start really helping out in being a co-pilot or an assistant. Biomedical knowledge is sort of doubling every 73 days. That's crazy. I mean, if you think about it, it's just hard to keep up. The clinical trials and studies are growing at 3x in the last decade. And then as we look towards precision medicine, the sequencing costs keep coming down, and there is an expectation it'll be within $100 range, and that means that that's another place where AI can really start to help and bring those elements that can drive insights. So when I've been sort of working with some of these large providers in the US, one of the places as we look at these issues where we're seeing where it doesn't quite have the impact that it's expected to have is that you look at some of the real world US cases. There's a lot of research work going on, but when you start applying that to a real world use case like a molecular tumor board or a cancer registry, you see there are missing pieces. The second piece that I've sort of noticed is general purpose AI doesn't really scale within the healthcare domain. Bigger or better using these large BERT models that are, quite the craze nowadays doesn't effectively translate into real impact in the biomedical domain. And then, sort of bridging this biomedical knowledge that's growing, and then with the real world data that's coming from imaging, from EHRs, is essential in order to make meaning out of it. And finally, I think this is the most important part that I've seen, and others have addressed this as well. The key is to make this interpretable, to make AI explainable, to have traceability, to have to build trust and confidence with the user using it. And that's one of the pieces that we in Microsoft are super focused on. And we're, as Helia mentioned, we're trying to develop and implement it throughout our entire tool chain, this concept of responsible AI. And then the entire cycle of what Mohammadi approached from model management as well as deployment, and then the feedback loop is essential in order to avoid things like model drift and others. And this is something that we take very, very seriously. It's like Satya said this before, which artificial intelligence represents one of technology's most important priorities, and healthcare is perhaps AI's most urgent application. And that's one of the reasons why we are leaning in 100% into these problems, which are pretty tough to handle: privacy, transparency, especially when it comes to patient care and patient data. And so we are trying to provide the tools and the platforms that builds that trust and confidence with the users. And now I want to just delve quickly deeper into some of the work that we are doing. We are going from the ground up So one of the places that we are investing in is on these pre-trained models, which can form the basis for a lot of the model creation that can happen that solves those last mile challenges. And these are, some of the work is around domain-specific models. So we have a model that we have built with PubMed, which has been trained from scratch on PubMed data. This is the biomedical knowledge, and we see that it far outperforms any general purpose or any other model in the market today. And so that's one of the things that we use to train. And so we're going to provide these as tools as part of our Azure ML offerings in the future. Another piece is, one of the big challenges in healthcare is you need to provide ways in which you can train these models with different sources of supervision, structured data, omics, and also be able to do it when there is unlabeled data. So how do you go about training models and fine-tuning models when you don't have a lot of labeled data? And getting annotated data has been one of the biggest challenges that we have noticed. So we are investing in tools and technologies that we call self-supervised learning and can really speed up model development. And then at the next layer, and Helia touched upon cognitive services, how do you then start to combine that with both knowledge and real-world data? And that's another place where we are starting to invest, and we have a few offerings that I'll just talk about in a bit. And a couple of different use cases that we have tried out with disease registries, molecular tumor board, and clinical trials. And if you think about this, it sort of spans both care, clinical care, as well as research, as well as clinical operations like cancer registries, which really help with downstream research. And I know I'm going to run out of time, so let me just quickly talk a little bit about some of the results that we're seeing. So some of the tools that I just talked about has proven to increase this labeling problem by more than 87%, and still have really high accuracy at the same time. And this is because of the tool chains that we are working on, very, very highly focused on the work related to healthcare. So with that, I'll just pause and hand back to Mario.
Great, thank you, Naveen. And that brings us to the end of the formal presentations. I would invite all the panelists to turn on their cameras and microphones and be subjected to some questions. Let's see if Sheila and Helia are able to join. Okay, so I don't actually see any questions in the chat, so I have a list of questions here. You all work for sophisticated organizations, obviously, in this space. If I am representing a smallish or medium-sized hospital outside of a major urban center, how do I go about getting started down this journey? Two-part question. One, what do I need to prepare in order to actually take advantage of some of these AI solutions? And two, what do you think is the best use case that I should start with that's going to give me good returns and it's not too complex as a starting point? And we'll start with you, Helia.
Absolutely. So one of the main points that I typically have conversations with our customers in, especially in Canada, which is a single payer system, is to focus on the low-hanging fruits when it comes to AI and deployment, because the platforms and the infrastructure, as I mentioned during my keynote, are not ready to go beyond a certain level of AI deployment. So I would definitely recommend focusing on the low-hanging fruits, and in some cases I jokingly say the fruits that are on the ground. And these solutions could be the ones that are proven to work, that are proven to reduce costs, that are proven to increase outcomes. Some of the examples that I can share is around conversational AI. We've seen a massive backlog of calls and just patients trying to reach the healthcare, the hospitals through phones, and asking questions that are repeatable. So how do we, create a system, a solution that mitigates some of those backlog of work and give back time to the care teams to basically spend the time with the patients more. Chatbots would be one example. Another area that would reduce the burnout for the physicians would be solutions like Nuance. And I'll let Sheila, dive deeper with that. But we've had several cases, especially in Canada, that developed Nuance technologies to reduce physician burnout because they are using the technology to be able to record the patient reports through transcribing their speech to text, and also through text analytics and categorizing those symptoms and treatment points. So these are kind of the two options that I think would be a good way to begin and start.
Maddie, how about you? Do you have an answer for us?
Yeah, and so like just kind of paraphrasing, like where to start and where would be good returns, and I think that depends on the individual hospitals in terms of where their challenges lie. So I'm a big fan of problem-backed design, and so every hospital might look different. So some hospitals may have issues more from an operations perspective of capacity. Some may be more from a clinical perspective of some specific deterioration or QIP indicators. So I think starting there. And also when I think about AI, I think about it in almost three contexts. Like one is the operational effectiveness, which is more thinking about, predictive analytics in terms of patient flow or census or ED forecasts or so on. Then there's a clinical element of reducing harm, maybe AI-assisted, clinical supports as well. And those are more internally focused. And then when you think about population health AI, when you start to connect data sets, that might be a later phase because there's additional challenges that come within that as well. So I think, again, thinking about that use case, thinking about which stream or strategy you want to focus in on. And then the last piece is kind of tying it back to AI evaluation. Something that you might see working at one organization, will it actually work against your patient population? And whether you look at evaluating that AI algorithm externally within your own data set, or if you look at peer hospitals that have a similar patient distribution. And then to the last point is, what's the sustainability model looking like? So you're going to be rolling up a little bit of that within your operational team, kind of as a proof of concept, but hopefully building into an infrastructure where you'll be able to continue going forward from there as well. And so that more from not only from an operations perspective, but also the clinical team. Are we thinking about this at a clinical level? Are you thinking more, a lot of hospitals have looked at an operational center or command center type of model. So what are you thinking about at a longer term in terms of this strategy?
Oh, great, thanks, Maddie. And Sheila, as a radiologist, I'm sure you have a few biases here, but why don't you share them with us?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think that it's a great question because this area can almost be overwhelming when trying to decide, well, how do you begin? And the first thing I would say is that, as many of the speakers have spoken about today, the resources to deploy any of these are huge. So one of the things that you can do to help with that is to adopt a single platform that you can then use for deploying multiple different kinds of AI. So obviously Nuance has our precision imaging network with a PIN platform for deploying various types of AI within radiology and various other specialties as well. And then I would say start small. I would say start with a single application because, again, I think there's a lot of unknowns when it comes to the number of resources and the number of challenges that you might face along the way. So I would say start with a single application, whatever it is. And I think it's very challenging to get much more specific as to which application among that, because it's really the apples to oranges comparison. So there's so many different areas, even just within radiology, that you could see to start with. I think that one thing that you can think about is whether you would like to start with something that improves efficiency. So in some sense, speeds up the current human workflow, or something that supplements the current human process. So something that's adding additional information in addition to what the human is already seeing. So you can decide which is more valuable to your institution, and then pick one use case among that.
Great, thank you. And we actually have some questions from the audience, and I'm going to move to those. And this one is primarily for Bobby. Somebody heard today about the translation function role, right? In your understanding, where should that live? Should that position be within clinical operations, within the project management office, within the IT teams? Where do you think that fits?
I think honestly, all of the above. I definitely, if I'm honest, in order to be successful when it comes to translating a model, your IT department obviously is going to be pivotal. Unlike the research world, once you're actually translating these things, these models into production, you need an infrastructure to back it that will give you the reliability, redundancy, etc. That a clinical system needs. That needs to be done within the clinical IT scope. In terms of the PM kind of role, we work with a PM that's assigned from our project management office within IMT here, and she's a great resource to help figure out the pathways. So translating models, especially homegrown stuff from your own institution into clinical deployment isn't a very well-trodden pathway, and most institutions don't have an approval process and a set of check boxes to go through to get it that way. So working with the PMO to do that is very helpful. And yeah, sorry, was there one other component to that question?
No, it's really where the role belongs, and you're saying everywhere.
Yeah, I know it's a really unsatisfying answer, but there's so many stakeholders, and I think it's important to involve everybody in order for us to be successful. So.
And the next question, first of all, comes from somebody I haven't spoken with in a really long time, but it's very Canadian in nature, and it's about First Nation governance principles. So, the sort of ownership, control, access, and possession. And are these sort of First Nation principles being included in the thinking around AI that's happening? Mehdi.
Yeah, so I think when we think about, again, from an AI perspective, when we think about the different populations that we have within our communities, definitely being respectful from a First Nations perspective as well. But I think that all fits into that strategy of health equity. So when we're thinking about creating these models, ensuring that we've actually trained it against the right patient populations, and when we're deploying it, we know all of those segments when we're cohorting that, so that it's not discriminating against one versus another. And so I would say that definitely as we think about health equity, those principles, as well as the broader principles that we're also looking through, that's pivotal to any of our AI deployments, and it's important to even evaluate against that as well to see how well we're performing.
Great, thank you. And Naveen, here's a question for you. Are you aware of any sort of large-scale AR or ML applications that have been used at sort of population level to help identify patients at risk?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm sure there's a couple of different components there. Like, for example, I'm working with a very large provider here in the US where we are doing cancer registry kinds of scenarios where we are using AI to extract things like, tumor site, histology, clinical staging, and pathological staging, and that feeds into these cancer registry, which is a huge sort of regulatory obligation for providers. And it's proving to be fairly successful, but I'd go back to something that Sheila said, which is being super outcomes focused. What is the role that AI plays here, right? And the way we think about it in this place is assistive in nature. The problem it's trying to solve is speed up, but it is assistive in that sense that it works to help registrars speed up their jobs. to abstract information into a registry.
Great, thank you. And I think we have time for one more question. I'm going to throw this to Helia. As you know, all of these models require large data sets in order to be trained. They also require access to a significant amount of data to do predictions, evaluation, diagnosis, whatever it is. One of the impediments is some of the legislation across the country here in Canada, whether it's some of the health information acts, those specific to some of the other provinces. Do you see those privacy legislations being updated to accommodate some of this? And who is pushing for those legislations to be updated? I think you're on mute.
Sorry about that. This is a fantastic question. And I think, we are hoping and we are educating different parties and different, institutions to move to that direction, because as we all know, and as we all see, we saw today, the data that we are gathering, especially the medical imaging data and medical records, it's doubling and tripling in a very short span of time. So how do we leverage that data is really important. And it actually ties back into the improvement of the care system. There are some institutional rules that are preventing that data sharing platform. I'm not aware of any legislative, and regulatory in place that are preventing the consolidation of the data in Canada, although I'm not the best person to speak on that. But as far as I know, it's really at the institution level and the data sharing, where the data sharing happens. Well, we have seen great synergy across, especially the research entities where they have consented data and the data donors are actually participating in these researchers. And we've seen a tremendous amount of improvement into the creation of a drug combination that would cure cancer cells within a patient's body. We've seen great improvements when you combine and consolidate all the data, especially in the rare disease domain where, as the name implies, you don't have a lot of data in rare disease. So you need to have access to as many data points as you can across the world to basically look at all the portfolios, look at all the different backgrounds, different ethnicities, different groups of individuals, so that you remove that bias that's in the nature of the data. And I'm really hoping that, the audience that are listening here are going to make those changes into our healthcare system so that we create a unified and a centralized data hub within Canada. We see many different individual entities who are moving towards that. They are creating their own data sharing platform. However, they're breaking the silos inside the organizations, but creating these data warehouses at that organizational level. But at the same time, again, we are having larger silos now. How do we connect these dots, connecting these data silos into one environment so that we can leverage? A great example is when we were looking at the variants of concern in COVID, we needed to have access to the sequence genome of these viruses so that we can come up with the variants of concern and then a next generation of the vaccines and so on and so forth.
Great. And Matt, welcome back. And we'll give you the chance to give us all the hook now. So
again, thank you to everybody. I just want to remind everybody that everybody here is available on social media in some form. So again, reach out to them, continue the conversation. I will forward off any details and any comments that I've gotten off to the speakers, and there may be opportunities for them to address them in future events or through social media, maybe about Twitter, through Twitter or that sort of thing. Other than that, everybody have a fantastic day, and we'll talk to everybody later. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.